Holy crap, has it been an interesting month or so on my end, folks. I'd like to thank you all so very much for being so patient with respects to the Kraken, with the content and all of that. I want to say right off the bat, we will have a public episode coming out tomorrow. It will be shortly on the Patreon for the members as an early access. We'll have a members episode coming out tomorrow, and we'll get right back into the swing of things. Now, basically, I know you folks truly trust me and when I tell you that, I'm sick and things like this, and I appreciate that, but I mean, yes, for those that have been asking, Dave, are you in an environment where your body is not used to, or with respects to weather and no sunlight? The answer is yes. I've never been in such cold conditions in my life. I've gone at this point probably 2 or 3 months without sun. I'm taking, vitamin D, C, B12 and all of that, but my immune system has gotten a workout. I caught, as many of you know, allegedly Omicron. That took a few weeks to get out of my system, was good for about a week or two, and then I caught what I'm coming off of now, which was a sinus infection, which then dropped into my upper respiratory side of things. And just as of, I think, like yesterday, my voice has gotten just good enough so that I can do a Kraken. So I can't thank you folks enough. I know a lot of you rely on the Kraken for the honesty and the unbiased reporting, or at least attempted unbiased reporting. So at this point, guys, honestly, I don't even know what I'm going to call the Kraken title, just because there's so much to catch up on. So let's just jump into it, because there's so much. I'm sure you folks wanted to have been eager to hear my my perspective on things and all that, which I'm super, super grateful for. So let's jump into it. First and foremost, please forgive me, by the way, if I cough or take some sips of tea throughout this. My throat, I'm still not entirely recovered. First and foremost, NATO Chief Stoltenberg is going to become Norway's next central bank governor. Again, make of that as you will. I'm not trying to paint that in any type of negative light, but however, again, notice how they all kind of keep it in the circle. You never see, for example, the average bartender who just went to school and started to study, or the average, mechanic is now going to become an advisor or work his way up in those positions. No, it's all done through, again, pre-planned. This was all, maybe we can argue even decades in preparation, not knowing that Mr. Stoltenberg would become the next central bank governor, but people within his vicinity of education, let's say, would get that position. Anyways. The next thing is that Moderna is collaborating with AstraZeneca on an mRNA therapeutic for a cardiovascular disease. Again, take that as you will. A little bit of a sneak peek. I am close to, I don't want to say for certain, knock on wood, don't want to jinx it, getting a hold of the one and only doctor who arguably was the, at least a part founder of the mRNA tech, and that I'm going to just stop there because we'll see what happens. And I'd love to pick that person's brain about these mRNA therapeutics. The next thing is that Angelique Coetzee, hopefully I didn't butcher her name, the doctor who discovered Omicron in South Africa, was reportedly pressured by European governments not to say that the variant causes mostly mild symptoms. Again, this is take that as you will. I just want to report that because I don't want to say, see, look, folks, it's all corrupt. No, let's play bias down the middle. Take that as you will, truly. The next thing is that New York's statewide mask or vaccine mandate for indoor businesses have been lifted, according to Governor Hochul. Again, I was assembling the notes for the Kraken even while I was sick, so please forgive me if some of these are outdated. But I tried to keep it in there because there's still follow-up points leading up to today. The next thing is that the Biden administration is rolling out a new program to distribute crack pipes in minority communities to help promote racial equality, paid for by American tax dollars. This is real. This is not skewed in any way to make it sound funnier than it really is, or exaggerated, or sensationalized, or hyperbolized. Nope, this is real. So, again, they somehow have the money for that, but they don't have. Anyways, it's I'm not even gonna get into that ramble there because we know what the answer is. They don't want to fix the problem of, for example, homelessness, people with health issues, all that, but they can somehow hand out crack pipes and they have the money for that. Anyways. The next thing is that footage shows trucks in gridlock on the Ambassador Bridge, which is a key trading link between the U.S. and Canada. It was temporarily closed Tuesday amid growing protest against Canada's COVID mandates. Again, speaking of which, the premier of the province of Alberta, where this Ambassador Bridge is situated, said he will be lifting all of the mandates and all of that for his province. Again, for those who don't know, premier is similar to that of a governor or senator in the U.S. or I guess you could say, governor or something like this, even in Europe, if you will. And again, he said at the very end of his speech, which made everybody laugh, this has nothing to do with the truckers. Certainly it seems to, but anyways. The next thing is that the coverage of the Beijing Winter Olympics by the Netherlands broadcaster had began and then ended immediately. A Chinese official yanked that broadcaster away almost as if he wasn't allowed to broadcast the publicity or certain parts of the Olympics. Again, take that as you will, kind of showing the CCP's influence of suppression, allegedly. The next thing is that the administrative court in Germany in Osnabrück has ruled the controversial shortening of the recovered status by the Robert Koch Institute from 180 days to only 90 days after a COVID infection unconstitutional. So again, take that as you will. The narrative seems to be crumbling. But again, the question is this a major pullback for them to come back at us even stronger in other ways? We don't know. It's hard to say, but it's possible. Again, if we're talking from an esoteric angle, not to conflate that with our KRAKEN episodes, but energetically, even for those that don't like us, there needs to be a balance, right? Give the masses some hope, some positive energy that they emit, because it's true. When you get happy, your bioresonance from your body emits more higher-based frequencies, right? So, I mean, you guys, I think, know where I'm going with that. The next thing is that Germany's former Chancellor Gerhard Schroeder nominated to the Gazprom board of directors. Is Gazprom the Russian state conglomerate of the oil thing? Because if so, again, look at how they all work together while also screwing each other. I mean, pertaining to world politics, and the only ones that suffer are people like you and I. The next thing is that Republican Senator Mitt Romney on the GOP moving to censure Liz Cheney and Representative Kinzinger said, quote, "Shame falls on a party that would censure persons of conscience who seek truth in the face of vitriol," end quote. The reason I wanted to bring this up is because, again, honestly, folks, we want full-on transparency from any world government. You got to redo it from the ground up. Mitt Romney can say, Pelosi can jab at the Republicans, and, there could be party infighting. Nancy Pelosi could say things, all that stuff. Whatever. It's got to be done from the ground up, because if not, I will hardly ever address it. I just wanted to bring this up because we haven't done a KRAKEN in a while, so... The next thing is that Nancy Pelosi doubles down and urges U.S. athletes once again to not speak out against the Chinese Communist government during the Beijing Winter Olympics. Take that as you will. The FDA said that Pfizer must produce hundreds of thousands of pages over the next 6 months starting March 1st, judge ruled in a final court order. Great. The next thing is that Toronto is preparing for a convoy of freedom protests. There were tractors and trucks that arrived, and I think they're still in the heart of the city. So take that as you will. The next thing is that German Interior Minister Nancy Faeser wrote a guest article for an anti-constitutional, extreme left-wing paper that, quote, fights all non-Marxist systems, including parliamentary democracy, end quote, the Bild reports, the outlet BILD Bild. Faeser recently hinted that she wants to ban Telegram in Germany because of, quote, right-wing extremism on the platform, end quote. Let me be very clear. Even though my personal beliefs lean conservative, truthfully, there is extremism on all sides. Absolutely. I'm not trying to use that as a cop-out answer, but if she's going to say we got to ban Telegram, okay, then you know what? We should make the argument to ban Twitter. Because, we can argue strongly that, not as a fact, but we could I think we could at this point argue that there's left-wing extremism as well. It's not suiting a particular narrative. And again, I hate to address it in this way because I don't want to appear to be slanted. If I do, please forgive me. That's not my intention. But it just seems to me, at least, that there could be a much more significant line to be drawn between that of a conservative and extremely right-wing faction compared to that of a left-wing and an extremely left-wing, or a liberal and an extremely left-wing faction. Does that make sense, guys? Hopefully it does. Anyways. Point being, you can draw the line, in my opinion, on the conservative side. You can differentiate much easier, whereas on the liberal side of things, which I'm not against certain liberal perspectives. I do hold some, believe it, but it's harder to sort of differentiate. Anyways. The next thing is that the Biden administration has waived U.S. sanctions on Iran's, quote, civil nuclear program in order to, quote, facilitate discussions that would help close a deal on a mutual return to full implementation of the JCPOA, end quote, the State Department said. In other words, they're caving. It's negotiation. It's basic negotiation. That's on the surface. Maybe they're not caving on the back end of things. But as I've said, just my opinion, but as I've said, Iran, I think they've had nukes for a while. This is all just a show. So... The next thing is that GoFundMe has deleted Canada's Convoy Freedom fundraiser for violating its terms. Canada's Freedom Convoy fundraiser, stating, quote, "The peaceful demonstration has become an occupation now," end quote. All donors may submit a request for a full refund until February 19th, and the remaining funds will be sent to established charities verified by GoFundMe. A lot of people said, again, apparently there's a way to get the money back if you go to the bank or something like this instead of going through GoFundMe. I'm not sure. That is not my area of expertise. This was, again, reported a few days ago, so this is technically old news, but we're catching up, so please forgive me. I just felt it was so significant to not cover. Speaking of which, 100 Joe Rogan episodes were removed from Spotify. He did say on a recent episode that he did that this was a political hit job. I couldn't agree more. Rogan was also offered by Rumble $100 million over 4 years by Rumble's CEO. That's $25 million a year to move all of his stuff to Rumble, his content, and to promised, at least by that CEO, to not be censored. That raised some questions, which was, again, could it be possible? Could he make the move? Okay, fine. Putting aside the back end details with lawyers and yada yada, people said, does Rumble even have that kind of money? Well, that then answers the question with, if Rumble as a company doesn't have that kind of money, they could get private investors, a handful of them, to a dozen of them to who have lots of liquid cash to do it. But this now becomes another problem. What if one of those investors gives a little wink, nudge, nudge to the CEO of Rumble and says, hey, I don't like what Joe Rogan's saying in this episode? Then you have influence from another direction. So where do you really win, right? The answer a lot of people have said is just Rogan starts his own server, his own website, asks people to chip $1 a month, and there you go. But the thing with that is I don't think Rogan wants to deal with the back end stuff. This is just my humble perspective. I don't know Joe personally or anything like that. But again, I'm just trying to play both sides here, right? Then the other platform, Odyssey, came out, and it seemed to sort of make fun of the Rumble proposal. It said they offered $100 gazillion. That was clearly comedy, whereas the Rumble offer seemed serious. Odyssey just seemed to troll, so to speak. So again, we're going to see what happens. It's still going on to this day as we speak, as I'm recording this, with respects to Rogan and all that. Also, at the same time, though, Rogan, I mean, if you trace the money, this is not a conspiracy. If you trace the money to the funding behind the hit pieces of articles on Joe Rogan from all over the place, regardless of the outlet, and the very bad compilation of Joe Rogan saying the N-word, it traces back to a DNC, Democratic National Committee super PAC. The money does. That's not a conspiracy. So I checked it out myself. So make of that as you will. There's some people that say, Joe Rogan saying the N-word like that, that's not good. I understand that view, guys. I really do. There's the other end of the argument where people say, hey, Rogan has an adopted black daughter. That's unconfirmed. However, that's allegedly true. I don't want to start making things up or anything like that. I'm just trying to present both sides of what I saw while I was scrolling through Twitter while I was sick. So again, take that as you will, folks. The next thing is that a car convoy is underway in Minneapolis, honking horns to protest the killing of Amir Locke by police. Again, as long as it's peaceful, so be it. The people are speaking, right? It's not for me to say if I think that murder was justified or not. I don't know a thing about it. Maybe I should have done some more research before this, but point being, as long as the people want it. The next thing is that 80% of serious COVID cases are fully vaccinated, says the director of an Israeli hospital. The vaccine has, quote, no significance regarding severe illness, end quote, says Professor Yaakov Jeris. This, for the sake of YouTube, you guys, is YouTube, so you don't take me down, is cited directly from IsraelNationNews.com. I want to be clear about that. That is a doctor saying that, not me. I'm paraphrasing, I'm quoting the doctor. So, the next thing is that Conservative MP Pierre Poilievre announces he's running for Prime Minister of Canada to, quote, replace Trudeau and restore freedom, end quote. The book 1984 was sitting right there on his bookshelf. So, again, it seems like politicians are really waking up to this. Also, yeah, I know you guys probably want to hear my thoughts on what Trudeau said about... Trudeau basically said, we need to keep the mandates in place so that we don't need more restrictions, which is like 1984 doublespeak. By definition, that sentence doesn't make sense. We need to restrict ourselves more so we don't need to restrict ourselves. That's basically what he said. Like, what a joke. Anyways. And also, there's a recent clip of Jordan Peterson on Patrick Bet-David's podcast, Valuetainment, going viral. I think it's got like 4 or 5 million views at this point. A 4 or 5 minute clip of Jordan Peterson's perspective on the trucker situation. So, The next thing is that China will stick to the zero COVID policy, Chief Epidemiologist Wu Zhenyu told communist state media. In China, entire cities or regions are being locked down and tested because of very few cases. Today, the Chinese city of Baixi in Guangxi, which is 3.57 million people, has been locked down. It has been reportedly sealed off and people can't enter or leave. This was 2 days ago, if I'm not mistaken. Again, this is the thing. The people, if they want to, they could speak up, but we see what the CCP does. And I'm not trying to say cave to the CCP. The question becomes, and I don't have the answer, I wish I did, do we get other nations to get involved? But then do the intentions and agendas of those other nations really have the pure intentions that they claim publicly? So it becomes a whole shit show. And the only unfortunate people that suffer are the ones just trying to, have a nice life in China. And I genuinely mean that. So the next thing is that Turkey has started to arrest citizens for, quote, insulting posts on social media over President Erdogan's COVID infection, reports the state news agency Anadolu. Take that as you will. As long as the people of Turkey are okay with that, so be it. I know there's disagreements there, but again, I'm not trying to dismiss it, but it's that same situation as I just mentioned with China. The next thing is that mask-free Obama did not look happy in photos snapped of him as he spoke with masked construction crew of his new multi-million-dollar Hawaii oceanfront mansion. Again, this goes into the whole thing of capitalism and all that stuff. The point being is that these people, these elites, don't follow the rules when they're pushing it themselves. So, again, take that as you will. The next thing is that 6 adults in Berlin insulted a 17-year-old girl and beat her to the hospital for not wearing a mask. Welt reports, the news outlet Welt, W-E-L-T. Again, it's causing division, just overall, and I hate that, we could say this is anecdotal, but at the same time, it's happening all over the world, so I could see why, at least for now, and I say that carefully, and I hate to sound grim, but the narrative is dropping, or collapsing. The next thing is that insolvency in Israel rose by 30% in the last 2 months among small businesses, according to the Jerusalem Post. Right, because the lockdowns, I would presume. The next thing is that Stacey Abrams posted a statement on Instagram in response to a viral video of her maskless in a classroom, and people just think, why is she maskless? She's supposed to be, an advocate for the community, set good examples. If COVID is so serious, why is she maskless? And then she goes, and I quote, "It's shameful that our opponents are using Black History Month event for Georgia children as the impetus for a false political attack," end quote. I see what she's saying, but she's also pivoting herself. So we can argue she's using the pivoting and weaponization of those children to her own pivoting. So again, take that as you will. The next thing is that Mayor of Ottawa declares a state of emergency in the city to deal with the ongoing trucker protest. Yeah, okay. I mean, even the province, the Premier of Ontario, had announced a state of emergency because of what's going on with the truckers. But he announces a state of emergency, and then he lets it leak to local citizen journalists, as of the day I'm recording this, that the mandates and the passports and the masks will be dropped, and an announcement will be coming in the next 3 days. Now, you might be saying, Dave, why is a province in Canada and the Premier of that province so significant to larger picture things? Well, Ontario makes up, I don't want to say the number because I don't know for certain, but a lot, if not most, of Canada's economy. We're basically a mini New York, essentially, Ontario. We have London, Toronto. Of course, there's Montreal and Quebec and Vancouver in BC and all that. But between Montreal, Vancouver, and Toronto, especially Toronto, however, economically, we're the driving force. I say we because I'm from there. So I imagine that's why this is occurring in that regard, in that way. But anyways, the next thing is that UK Labour leader Keir Starmer was bundled into a police car after being swarmed by protesters shouting "traitor" Jimmy Savile and accusing him of, quote, protecting pedophiles. I don't know the details of this particular story of this UK Labour leader Keir Starmer. For those from the UK, maybe in the YouTube comments, if you'd like to clarify, I'd be more than happy. Yeah, and speaking of which, making people happy and all that, a judge banned honking in downtown Ottawa for at least the next 10 days. Ontario Superior Court Justice Hugh McLean said the injunction is temporary because he needs to hear more evidence, but has heard enough to make the ruling. The evidence was the honking. So again, take that as you will. How that could be realistically enforced, I have no idea, but The next thing is that billionaire Peter Thiel to step down as board member of Meta, Facebook's parent company, to support Trump-aligned candidates, the Wall Street Journal reports. Zuckerberg's Meta stock fell 5.1% the other day, adding to losses after its bleak forecast last week. Yeah, Facebook lost $250 million, I think, in a matter of minutes or hours. Peter Thiel is also, believe it or not, I believe Mr. Eric Weinstein works for Peter Thiel. Make of that as you will. Peter Thiel is a controversial figure, based on what I've read and all that. Again, I really do mean controversial. I'm not trying to lean in one direction or the other. I kind of want to stop there talking about him because it's not for me to say. I don't know the details of this gentleman's life and all that. So, and I do like Eric Weinstein, although there's been some speculation raised about him. And, again, not to get off track. But anyways. The next thing is that the New York City mayor has said, quote, "The more plant-based you eat, the better in health you are. I've got to get New Yorkers to eat a plant-based centered life," end quote. We're going to be covering this in an upcoming members episode tomorrow, folks, because there's a lot there that unfortunately I wish I could speak on publicly, but I would get nicked for. Trudeau said, quote, "Individuals are trying to blockade our economy, our democracy, and our fellow citizens' daily lives. It has to stop," end quote. No, that's him. That's him doing that to us. At least in my opinion. So, whatever. By the way, folks, a lot of these truckers are vaccinated. They're just fed up with the continued BS and all that stuff. So, keep that in mind, please. Let's see here. The next thing is that Pfizer forecasts $54 billion coronavirus-related sales in 2022 from its COVID vaccine and antiviral pill. Make of that as you will. ARK Invest's Cathie Wood has sold 142 million of Twitter shares ahead of the earnings report. Twitter stock is down over 45% in the last 6 months. How Cathie Wood can get away with that, again, make of that as you will. Maybe she won't, but it happens all the time, like Nancy Pelosi's husband and all of that. CNN's health pundit Lena Wen suddenly announces, quote, "The science has changed on mandatory face masks." I'm just going to leave that there. The next thing is that Dr. Joan Ramon Laporte Rosello, one of Spain's eminent experts in pharmacovigilance, appeared on February 7th in the Spanish Congress and said, quote, and I'm going to say this for YouTube, this is according to a Dr. Joan Ramon Laporte Rosello in the Spanish Congress, and I quote, "The so-called Pfizer and Moderna mRNA vaccines are not true vaccines. They're drugs based on a technology never used in therapeutics until now. This mass vaccination is a global experiment without precedent in the history of mankind," end quote. He also said there is nothing to indicate that vaccines help save lives against Omicron specifically, and third and fourth doses are not justified, and they're clearly not justified for children and youth. Make of that as you will. This is cited right from Liberia.es, and again, Spain's Congress. So, interesting that the fight seems to be winning in a particular regard as it pertains to, again, there's this whole thing of what they're saying, they're regulating everyone's immune systems all around the world, all that stuff. I don't want to get into that, not just because of YouTube, but also because I have no clue what I'm talking about there. So, the next thing is that Republican Representative Troy Nehls of Texas is accusing Capitol Police of entering his office without his knowledge and photographing confidential legislative products protected by the speech and debate clause of Article 16 of the Constitution. Again, make of that as you will. This is what I mean by infighting within parties, not just within the U.S., but all over the world. There needs to be a massive revamp, a paradigm shift, if you will. And no, I'm not speaking of the fourth turning in a good way. Maybe we could say fourth turning in a good way, but again, the fourth turning, at least that we know it to be, doesn't seem to be good. Again, folks, I'm not against any of this tech, any of this AI stuff or any of this, but I'm also not for it either. The problem I have is, of course, again, the people at the top and how they use it. So, the next thing is that Russia and China are preparing many gas agreements to Putin's visit to Beijing, says Kremlin aide. Yeah, makes sense. Strategy. Doesn't take a genius to figure that out. The next thing is that U.S., Canada, and 20 other countries are concerned about freedom of speech in Hong Kong, particularly because of the Olympics there. I believe I think a Swedish... this may not be accurate as it pertains to where she's from, but a particular Swedish, Norwegian, please forgive me, folks, female athlete was made a video of herself crying, and I think it got to social media saying she's been basically given the runaround by the CCP. She tested positive for COVID, and they're putting her through all kinds of nonsensical, dangerous, scary stuff. I want to leave it there because I don't know what they put her through specifically. But speaking of which, South Korea drops. Also, by the way, for the U.S. and Canada and 20 other countries to be concerned about freedom of speech in Hong Kong, that's not saying much, because I mean, yes, it's not as bad as Hong Kong, we can say, in places like Europe or North America, but you see what's going on in Australia, and like the way they're trying to make it so that we cannot view, in some cases, not all, but in some cases, certain raw medical data reports by changing the IP address to that of overseas. You have to have a Japanese IP address in one case to look at some of these studies. So again, take that as you will. South Korea has dropped its test and trace strategy in face of record high daily COVID cases. Over 64% of the adult population have received a vaccine booster shot. Take that as you will. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson has declared the last remaining COVID restrictions, including self-isolating if testing positive, will end a full month early. You see, folks, speaking of which, though, on the opposite end of things, Health Minister Lauterbach said, quote, "In Germany, it's not enough just to get on the nerves of the unvaccinated. You have to do more," end quote, in an AFP interview. He urged the swift introduction of compulsory vaccinations in the general population. Again, take that as you will. The same way I just reported about Boris Johnson lifting these restrictions, Germany and Austria and a handful of other countries seem to be going full force nonstop. Maybe the elites think, okay, if the people of those particular nations don't push back avidly enough, we can use that as testing grounds to see, as we sort of ease off on the rest of the world, what would happen if we put pressure on the rest of the world at a later date, right? Possible. I'm just speculating, by the way, folks. The next thing is that in the Netherlands, the cabinet has considered scrapping most COVID restrictions, including the corona admission ticket and mask mandates, by the end of the month. Again, take that as you will. A new study finds, according to Disclosed TV, that vaccine mRNA and spike in lymph nodes for 60 days after the shots. It finds the researchers stopped collecting probes after this time period. Almost 50 researchers worldwide collaborated on the work. This is according to Cell.com. Make of that as you will. The next thing is that Tunisian judges, I want to be clear, by the way, on what I just said there for YouTube. I'm not saying that as fact, folks. I'm just reporting it. So, Tunisian judges on strike as fears grow over authoritarian rule. Members of the judiciary say they live under a growing climate of intimidation following the president's power grab. Again, assuming this is not an intelligence operation, I would be inclined to believe those judges, but I don't have all the entire context there, so we have to follow up on that. The next thing is that a Syrian soldier was killed in an Israeli missile attack near the Damascus. Surface-to-surface missile attacks came, quote, from the direction of the occupied Golan, end quote, Syrian state media says. Again, this is pointing fingers. I look at it as human on human. Whoever, it's a chess game. It's a chess game, and the only ones that suffer are, again, average people, or even in this case, the Syrian soldier. Maybe Israel did launch the missile. Maybe they didn't. It's not for me to say. But see how it's just like little children. No, he didn't. No, he didn't. No, or she didn't. Again, it doesn't end. The next thing is that Russia warships are heading to the Black Sea for drills. Russia announced last month its navy would stage exercises involving all its fleets in the latest show of strength. Yeah, it's an ego push from Putin, in my opinion, personally. But he's not the only one to do that, by the way, so it's not like that's anything new. The next thing is that Israeli soldiers opened fire at a car in Nablus, killing Palestinians. Palestinian Authority condemns the assassination of 3 Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, calling it a, quote, heinous crime, end quote. Again, I want to be very clear here. Human on human, that's how I view it. So whatever the findings come of, assuming the investigation is not tampered with, that is what it will be. Again, I look at it as human on human. This is just me personally. The next thing is that the United Nations Court has ordered Uganda to pay $325 million in reparations to the DR Congo. The International Court of Justice has ordered Kampala to pay the damages, which is a fraction of the $11 billion demanded by Kinshasa. I don't have details on this, but again, the UN has ruled, and presuming that there is no, I'm not trying to say it as, the UN, it's all said and done, the heavenly body. No. Assuming there's no corruption and no intelligence incursions, which I imagine there are, whether immediately or at a later date via this is big money, folks. So again, we can imagine Uganda, not being happy with this, particularly the government, and if they may use some other means or ways economically or intelligence-wise to sort of not pay this, but we'll follow up on that. The next thing is that Sri Lanka's central bank has denied its risk of default. Sri Lanka is facing its worst financial crisis in decades, and foreign exchange reserves have fallen to 2.36 billion. I'm not an economist. I don't know, even from a non-developed nation, sad, unfortunately, because Sri Lanka is a beautiful place. If that's a lot, but in terms of the amount financially, but see, I can't help but think, even as I was reading this, that the elites are just collapsing world economies purposely, right? So, the next thing is that Antony Blinken is in Australia for Quad talks as Ukraine tensions simmer. U.S.'s top diplomat expected to discuss growing China-Russia ties at the Quad meeting of foreign ministers in Melbourne. Again, talks 48 hours ago simmered, allegedly, tensions with Ukraine, but then we have it ramping up again, as you'll see shortly, which we'll get to in a moment. The next thing is that the United States has offered a $10 million reward for information on the ISKP leader. ISKP, an Afghanistan affiliate of ISIL or ISIS, had claimed responsibility for the deadly attack on the Kabul airport last year. Pardon me, folks, I'm going to go with a little bit of, in my opinion, the CIA had a hand in making that happen so that they didn't fully get out of Afghanistan. So I don't know if I even believe this, and this whole offer could even be a bogus thing too, right? I'm sorry that I got to question the American government in that way, but they've lied so much, especially from the intelligence community. So the next thing is that U.S. climate envoy urges cooperation with Mexico amid tension. Mexico's president wants to raise investment in fossil fuels while limiting private wind, natural gas, and solar power. Again, it's just, when I read something like this, I just see the empire of the United States, not trying to say that in a bad way always, but the empire just wants its way, and it wants Mexico to do what it wants. So we'll follow up with that. The next thing is that Peru's president swears in its fourth cabinet in 6 months. Pedro Castillo's latest reshuffle comes amid internal struggles in the government and attacks by right-wing groups. Again, presuming this is all done legislatively according to the process deemed set by the people and all that, and by the government there, so be it. Now, if there's an intelligence incursion, we got a different problem on our hands, or corruption, or again, we got a problem. But I don't see anything wrong with a fourth cabinet in 6 months, presuming they're really trying to get it right. And again, that's assuming they're trying to truly get it right. So I say that carefully. The next thing is that UK-based scientists have smashed the nuclear fusion energy record. Oh, how convenient, by the way. Push to harness the power of the stars takes a leap forward with milestone results in atom fusing experiment. Convenient, with respects to all of a sudden nuclear power is okay, or it is controllable. It is, anyways, that's a whole other thing. But the next thing is that the Pope said war in Ukraine would be madness and urges talks. Okay, no disrespect to the Pope. I'm not trying to be overly sarcastic or a smartass, but yes, thank you. No shit, Sherlock. And again, no disrespect to the Pope, but yeah. Okay, it's a guy in a robe who walks around with his hand and, bless everyone. And I'm not trying to make fun of anybody Christian. I'm just saying, the fact that he just said what everyone else is saying, I'm just saying he's a human like everyone else. So, again, no disrespect to my Christian evangelical friends. I have tremendous respect for all religions, mainly for the principles that they push on the positive angle of things, not so much the money side and corruption and greed and obviously all that. But anyways, because I really do think, religions like, Hinduism and Buddhism and Catholicism, Christianity, please forgive me if I missed a few, they really enforce nice beliefs in terms of positivity and all of that. It starts getting all messed up and mucky when you start, when it comes to interpretation of stories and meanings and yada yada, right? Anyways, so again, no disrespect to the Pope. But at the same time, he's a guy in a rope. The next thing is that North Korea has completed a secret base for missiles, says the U.S. think tank. CSIS says the Hoijong-ni base, pardon me if I butchered that, located near the Chinese border, is likely intended to house intercontinental ballistic missiles, IBMs for short, excuse me. Yeah, I believe it. Just like, that's my view like with Iran. They've had nukes for a while. I mean, I don't, this U.S. think tank probably funded by the CIA. We also have to consider that maybe this is a lie too, to push for a certain justification on the West side and its allies. So again, it's hard to say. The next thing is that the University of California has agreed to pay nearly 250 million American dollars or 185 million euros to over 200 women who allege they were sexually assaulted by a campus gynecologist. Multiple women accused the university's LA site of deliberately hiding James Heaps's alleged sexual abuse of patients. Okay, assuming this was done through the normal litigation process and was not tampered with, holy cow. Yeah, I could see why this is justified. Truly. F that guy, assuming he did it. The gynecologist, and I know it's a guy because I saw a photo of him as I was putting the notes together. The next thing is that SpaceX has lost dozens of satellites after they were hit by a geomagnetic storm a day after launch, causing them to fall from orbit and burn up. Such solar storms are caused by powerful explosions on the sun's surface, which spit out plasma and magnetic fields that can hit the Earth. Yep. The company owned by Elon Musk said up to 40 of 49 satellites from last week's launch were hit. They had been due to join its Starlink satellite internet project. I know it's a KRAKEN episode, guys, but I can't help but think this is something much deeper in terms of a battle of different factions, if you will. I don't know. But the next thing is that, let's see here. Japanese motor industry giant Toyota saw its profits fall by 21% for the last 3 months of 2021 as the global chip shortage hit production. Let's see here. It comes as manufacturers around the world are struggling to find enough microprocessors for their products. I think this has to do with Taiwan and China there. But again, I mean, also keep in mind, folks, you got tension still with the CCP in Taiwan over there, right? So you got that. You got Russia. I mean, the West and Europe are up against a... yeah, I mean, not that... I mean, if we could just de-escalate all of it, that'd be great. But as of today, the day I'm recording this, there was apparently a Twitter outage. Users were experiencing massive glitches. First thing I think of is a foreign adversary. But again, we also have to consider that maybe foreign adversaries won't want to do this because they also need Twitter to use their certain angles of their operations to be carried out. So I kind of weigh that back and forth in my head. The next thing is that Israel is evacuating relatives of embassy staff in Ukraine, Reuters reports. Earlier today, Japan, South Korea, and the Netherlands advised citizens to leave the country. Take that as you will. Speaking of tension with Russia and all of that, French President Emmanuel Macron refused a Russian COVID test ahead of his meeting with Vladimir Putin, the Kremlin confirmed. The test required a health protocol that was unacceptable and did not fit with the French leader's schedule, a French source told the BBC. It follows reports that Mr. Macron refused the PCR test over fears the Russians would get a hold of his DNA. Again, I can understand that, just like how when, for example, when this first started, when the pandemic hit globally, U.S. ambassadors that were sent back from China to the U.S. were made to bent over before they got on their plane and be swabbed anally, like anus swabs, literally, for two reasons, in my opinion. That was one way of the CCP saying to the U.S., we're embarrassing your people, and also DNA collection. If you get someone's fecal matter or DNA, or even a slight little DNA of it, I understand what Macron is saying. You can find out their medical issues. You can, from an intelligence perspective, when they're going to go to the doctors, all of that, which only creates an opening for your enemies. So I get it. But at the same time, I also have to think, you know, if DNA and this information could be transmitted via air and things like that in ways and energy frequencies we can't even see, I don't know if refusing a PCR test would be number one on the list of concern. But again, I get it's also a show of, like, you know, screw you, Vlad type thing, in my opinion. But with that being said, folks, how long have we been going on for? Almost 40 minutes, almost a 40-minute KRAKEN. Lots to catch up on. Again, I'd like to thank you all so very much for watching and listening. I promise starting Monday next week, we're back to the normal routine with the KRAKEN, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays for you folks. And we will catch you all very, very soon. Cheers.